in the coffee.
All you're going to do is review.
So, that's not what I'm going to do. We only dedicate one page to review.
It takes 15 minutes, that's another.
I ain't got to put up with you.
You don't have to. But I'm here, so you're going to have to.
Hey, Bob. What's going on, man? How you doing? I mean,
Yeah, he's adding coffee to the sugar.
Alright, I'll help you out. Only Sundays?
What? Let's go! Time to start!
Turn that off.
Wow! Donnie, go sit down.
Thank you. Sit down now.
And that concludes my remarks for this evening. I hope you all enjoyed it. Are there any questions? No. That was a special presentation of the lesson for Donnie, because that's just about how long his attention span is. What? You quit paying attention? What? All right, let's get started. We are going to be back. We are back in Exodus. We're back. All right. So, what has been? And no, I'm not talking about Brother Larry.
huh?
Huh?
How did I get involved in this?
I don't know. I was just picking on you. I already picked on Donnie, so now it's your turn.
You like review so much.
That's right.
Yes.
You like review so much. So we've studied the first plague, right? The first plague in Egypt. The first plague was the water of the Nile turned to red or to blood, depending on how you want to interpret that. Remember, red and blood was the same word. Okay. For 7 days, there was no fresh water available to the people or the livestock from the river, or any water that was fed by the river or taken up out of the river and stored. All right, so no water. Once again, the magicians create a facsimile or a fake miracle that looked like what God had done. Okay? It looked like it. But
Did it taste like it?
they didn't say. They didn't say. They couldn't undo what God had done. So while they could trot out something that looked the same, they couldn't undo it. They couldn't back it up. Okay, and so that was enough, though, to convince Pharaoh that this was all a trick. That Moses was just a better magician than the ones he had. Okay, so he's like, nah, I'm not acquiescing to your demands at this time. Okay, and so remember what God told Moses. He said, Moses is a stubborn man. I'm going to use that against him. And so that's what he's done. So Moses is convinced, this is all trickery, and the hook is set. Because Pharaoh, yeah, sorry, Pharaoh. Pharaoh, yeah. I was thinking Moses was the one that was doing the miracles. But Pharaoh is convinced this is all a trick, and now the hook is set, right? He's gonna travel down this path. So God's got him right where he wants him. Okay? So let's pick our story up, chapter 8, verse 1, and we'll read. I'm going to be reading New Living Translation, so modernizes the English. If you're following along in something else, you might notice some differences. And then the Lord said to Moses, "Go back to Pharaoh. announce to him, "This is what the Lord says. Let my people go so that they can worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs across your entire land. The Nile River will swarm with frogs. They will come up out of the river and into your palace, even into your bedroom and onto your bed. They will enter the houses of your officials and your people. They will even jump into your ovens and your kneading bowls. Frogs will jump on you, your people, and all your officials." And then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, raise the staff in your hand over the rivers, canals, and ponds of Egypt, and bring up frogs over all the land." So Aaron raised his hand up over the waters of Egypt, and frogs came up and covered the whole land. But the magicians were able to do the same thing with their magic. In other words, they could pull a frog out of their hat. Okay? And they too caused frogs to come up on the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and begged, "Plead with the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go so they can offer sacrifices to the Lord." "You set the time," Moses. There we go. "You set the time," Moses replied. "Tell me when you want me to pray for you, your officials, and your people. Then you and your houses will be rid of the frogs. They will remain only in the Nile River." "Do it tomorrow," Pharaoh said. "All right," Moses replied, "it will be as you have said. Then you will know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials, and your people. They will remain only in the Nile River." So Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh's palace, and Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs he had inflicted on Pharaoh. And the Lord did just what Moses had predicted. The frogs in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields all died, and the Egyptians piled them into great heaps, and a terrible stench filled the land. You know what a stench is?
Smell.
It's a really bad smell. Not just a smell. Roast beef smells. Okay? But this was really stinky bad. And when Pharaoh saw that relief had come, he became stubborn and refused to listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had predicted. All right. So where are we then? So frogs. You think frogs just hopping? Oh, come on. You know, I worked hard for that one. Y'all not going to give me nothing? Okay.
Where's the drummer on that one?
All right. You think frogs just hopping? So frogs are here, there, everywhere, and they're in everything. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that, because when you read this, right, it's kind of hard to imagine. So now, as we alluded to last week, right, when we talked about the water, it's very tempting to attribute to the first plague. Right? If the water turned bad, of course the frogs would leave the river. Right? We're going to talk about that. Water goes bad, stinky fish, frogs naturally leave the water. But some things I want you to take note of here. The water went bad and the fish died, and that was all 7 days. It went 7 days before God told Moses to go back to Pharaoh. 7 days. No frogs, just bad water. Stinky water, okay? So a question. See who here remembers their grade school biology. How long does it take a frog's egg to hatch? You got nothing for me?
Yes.
Nothing?
Well, they turn into tadpoles first.
Well, from egg to frog. How long does it take to go from egg to frog? Travis knows? Huh?
90 days.
Ooh, very good. How long does a tadpole need to become a frog? And how long does an itty-bitty frog need to become to be big enough to be a nuisance? Okay, so
One more day.
One more day.
Yeah.
All right. So I want y'all to think about this thing. Welcome to 7th grade biology. Does anybody remember this chart?
No.
No? No? Well, it's a good thing you're here tonight. All right. So we're going to talk about how long it takes from an egg just to get to a young frog. Okay. So that's the life cycle. You see it there. Day 1, day 3 through 4, day 6, 9, 12. Day 70, the legs start to grow. Day 84, the front legs are growing. Okay, and just after the 84th day, right, the little frog looks like a little frog with a tail, and then the tail drops. So it takes at least 84 days, or 6 days shy of Travis's guess of 90 days, to reach maturity, or to reach froghood. So, for those of you studying at home, that's 3 months. Okay? 3 months. Bear with me. Now, after that, it takes about 4 years for a frog to become a reproducing adult. Right? Who knew, right? I looked this up. It must be true. So, you can do the math. 7 days of bad water, and it takes 84 days to get from a tadpole to a frog, and 4 years to be able to reproduce. So could all of these frogs have left the river?
Nope.
No. No. All right? So, this is a toadful here.
Oh.
Come on. Come on. That's what you get for giving me a week off, okay? All right, so let's talk about the scope of this plague here. There are actually 9 species of toad and frog living along the Nile. Ribbit. This is one here. This is a little recreation right here of something called a desert rain frog. Desert rain frogs, if you put them in the water, they will drown. They cannot swim. Okay? Ribbit. So these frogs are everywhere. So question, how many frogs would it take to cover the land and get into everywhere?
Millions.
Millions.
Just a mental exercise, right? How many frogs are we talking about? Okay? Remember,
Too many.
okay, they're in the houses, right? Now, when we were talking about the water, right, they had to dig on the river to dig up water, right? But guess what Pharaoh doesn't have to do? Pharaoh doesn't have to dig. But those frogs are everywhere. They're in the palace. They're in all the official places. They're in the kitchens, in the bowls, the kneading troughs, okay? So anybody ever made bread from scratch?
Yes.
Yeah? So you know what you have to do with bread when you make it from scratch? You have to knead it. Right? No, you don't have to knead it like you have to knead it. You have to massage it. Right? You have to work it. Okay? And so they had, just like you might on your kitchen countertop, you might have a large wooden cutting board. And that may be where you knead it, right? You may put some wax paper down. You might say, I don't need a cutting board. I'm just going to do it here on my countertop. All right? So we'll get into kitchens here in a minute. But the kneading troughs or the kneading bowls where they work that bread, God said the frogs will be everywhere. They are pervasive. Okay? They're everywhere. You can't turn around. It was old McDonald's farm time. Right? Here a frog, there a frog, everywhere a frog. Y'all tough crowd tonight. Y'all tough crowd. Man. Okay. They were in the bedrooms. They were in the beds. Okay? Tonight you're going to sleep with your froggies. No?
Oh, Lord.
No? I'm not getting no love here, brother. They're not giving me no love.
Neither is Shannon.
I'm not getting no love. What'd you say, brother? Did you smart off?
Yes, sir. I found your humor funny.
What's coming up with them bad jokes?
Woo.
Amen.
I think they're amazing.
All right. We'll keep going.
They're quite funny.
Not one, not two, but he says they're going to be hopping on you. Think about that for a minute. I mean, it's one thing to kind of walk through, oh, look, there's a bunch of frogs here, and they're hopping on you. Okay? If you stop walking, they hopped up on your feet. Right? If you sat down, they hopped up in your lap. The frogs were hopping on you. If you lay down, hey, it's time to go to bed. Well, after you got them out of your bed, right? Uh-huh.
Time to start cooking frog legs.
You know, some of them frogs weren't very good for frog legs. This particular little jewel right here has legs that are so short that it can't swim. That's why they drown if you put them in water. Yeah, they can't even hop. They just kind of bustle along. But if you lay down, once you got them out of your bed, they got back in bed with you and hopped all over you. Right? So you're laying there in bed and you think your wife is getting frisky. Right? And no, it's a frog jumping on you. Oh my gosh! Right? The frogs were everywhere. This wasn't just a mild plague. It wasn't just an inconvenience. This was an absolute nightmare. Okay? All night long, these frogs were hopping on you. And in those days, beds were not equipped with Serta mattresses. Okay? You didn't have a nice, big, comfortable mattress. So beds were basically, a mattress was just a cloth bag, might be stuffed with other torn cloth or feathers or wool, off a sheep. You sheared your sheep, stuffed the wool in a mattress to kind of soften it up a little bit. So your bed was a low bench or a lounge, so it wasn't like we have today, right? Today we have to climb up into it. They were real low to the ground, typically. Or if you weren't very well off, you just had your mattress or a mat laid right on the floor. And if you were one of those folks that laid right on the floor, like a working stiff and slept on the bare floor, that's where the term stiff came from. Because if you've ever slept on the floor, right? What's the first thing you got to do when you get up? Oh, right?
You got to pop every joint.
You got to pop every joint. So either way, it was easy.
And don't have to sleep on the floor.
Yeah. Well, you ain't got no frogs in the house either, I'll bet. Either way, it was easy for frogs to get up into the beds. All right? And what I'm trying to point out here is there was no relief. Right? We say, oh, there were frogs everywhere, right? And sister here just a second ago said, I'm going to start cooking frog legs, right? You can't cook them fast enough to keep up with how many of them there are in your house. This was a nightmare, right? The water was an inconvenience. It caused a lot of people to get a little grumpy. But frogs, everywhere, frogs. Again, right? Old MacDonald. Frog here, frog there, right? But they were also in the kitchens. In the kitchens. Imagine where you're going to be cooking your food and it's infested with frog. How many of y'all, just don't raise your hand because I don't want to know. But how many of y'all have ever lived in a place infested with cockroaches? Right? Generally an apartment complex, right? Maybe a neighborhood. Right? And when you walk in to the kitchen and you flip the light on in the middle of the night, the countertop scurries away. Right? You're like, oh my gosh, you got roach motels everywhere. They won't check in because the countertops are much too nice. Right? So they were in the kitchens. So kitchens in this day did this right so that I don't have to break my back bending over to me. This is what an oven looked like. This is a kitchen right here.
Yeah, it's a pizza oven.
Huh?
Yeah, it's what we call a pizza oven.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but even our pizza ovens are kind of up in the air. But this one, you notice it's down low. You see this down here? This is the dishes, the cooking dishes, the kneading bowls or troughs, right? Notice the proximity of this to ground. Now, these steps here would have gone up to either the roof, or if this was a really wealthy family, this might have been a basement, right? I don't know. I just found a picture to illustrate what a kitchen might look like back in the day. But notice that you have these steps right here. So anywhere people had a convenience so that they could get somewhere, like steps,
There were frogs.
there were frogs, right?
Learn how to throw knives.
That's right. You had frogs everywhere. Ovens usually close to the floor. Food prep was done on the floor or on a low bench, right? Right down in there amongst the frogs. Okay, so
Give you a little protein with your bread.
yeah, yeah. So we're talking about a lot of toes. Come on now, I'm really working hard for y'all here. Y'all not giving me no. So how many frogs does it take to infest an entire country? I just did a little mental exercise, right? This got me thinking. How many frogs are we talking about? Right? So to infest one house to the levels that are being described, I'm thinking maybe 16,000 frogs. One house. You say, how did you come up with that number? Well, if you figure 10 frogs per square foot, an average of 1,600 square foot per residence. Now, I figured that by thinking that the house itself would be about 30 by 30 feet, maybe 35 by 35 feet. The roofs were always considered a second room. Even though it was open, right? There was a stairway and you could go up to the roof. And on hot summer nights, you might put a tarp up, like a canopy. We would call it a canopy today. And you'd sleep on the roof.
Or according to Proverbs, when Mama's talking too much.
Or when Mama's talking too much. It's better to live in the corner of your attic. They didn't mean an attic like we have today. They meant a roof. I'm not going to question the brother how he knows this. I mean, I ain't afraid of her.
Yeah, right. She can't hear him.
Now we've heard it all.
Didn't we study that for like 9 months?
I'll just.
You're not going to say anything.
Not a word.
I was going to say, have y'all ever noticed how when they're on good terms, it's my Jen A, and when they're not, it's my wife Jennifer? Have you noticed that? You've noticed it, yeah? Huh? Okay. I'm teasing. Don't joke. Oh no.
I know, you got it worked up.
You okay?
I don't know.
Breathe.
You know, I bet you they were thinking it couldn't get any worse than this, but it does.
So I come up with all these neat little puns here, and it's making fun of the pastor that gets everybody going. Hey.
Well, my deacon said he just had eye surgery, and
He called me
now that
bird's eye.
now that he can see clearly, he said, "I didn't realize you were as small as you are."
Well, it's better than looking at your wife and going, "Who are you again?" Don't hit him till his eye heals, sister. All right. So I'm looking at it maybe 16,000 or 16,000 frogs per household. By the time you get the yard and the road right out front, I mean, 16,000. Now multiply that by the population, right? There's probably 1 to 3 million. That doesn't count slaves. Might have 4 or 5, 6 people per house. That's a lot of frogs.
Too for your animal.
That's a lot of, yeah, and I'm not even counting stables and all that where the animals were, although they probably weren't as inconvenienced as the people, okay? You couldn't walk without stepping on them. That's my point. They were so thick that you couldn't, if you were trying to get them all out of the way, you couldn't get anywhere, right? If you were taking steps. Now remember what people had for footwear, right? They didn't have work boots with steel toes and leather uppers that came up mid-calf, right?
So you felt the crunch when you
They
stepped
had,
on it.
well, they had open sandals.
Gooey.
Gross.
or
Barefoot.
they was barefoot. So not only did you feel the crunch, you felt the squish that went along with it. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So all that mess on your feet, right? And it goes on and on
And you
and
didn't take
on.
a shower
And-
until Saturday.
Dawn was looking over my shoulder, and I was doing this just a little mental exercise. I'm not saying these are the right numbers, just a little mental exercise because I'm trying to quantify how many frogs this is, right? And so she's looking over my shoulder, and I'm doing this 16,000 frogs per household, and she's looking at it, and you're squishing them between your toes. You got frog guts coming up between your toes, and you know what she says? What she gets out of it? She says, "Can you imagine the noise they might make at night?"
What about during the day too?
Or the crunch.
Anybody ever been out in the woods
Yep.
or in a countrified area just after a little rain and it gets dark?
Right here in Liberty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right here. And that's not 16,000 frogs per house. I don't know how many frogs it is, but it ain't that many frogs, okay?
Makes me go to sleep.
So
That many frogs?
there's always one in a crowd. I don't understand. Okay. So think about the noise that would make. So, yeah. So Brother Shane's over here. That put me right to sleep, right? Nice little froggy massage and a little song playing in the background.
When you go camping, you hear them, and
Yeah.
I sleep well.
All right. But are they hopping on you?
They went out now.
As long as you got
Are they
an
hopping
air
on you? Oh, okay. All right. So, who are you calling frogs? Why frogs? Why frogs? Now, we talked about this. Why the Nile? And we talked about God of the Nile and how they had deified the Nile, and the Nile was responsible for their lives, right? So what about frogs? Well, as you can see here, they had a frog goddess. A frog goddess, right? It was the body of a woman and the head of a frog. There are no jokes. No jokes. I make no jokes here, okay? You make a joke, you're on your own.
I used to date a girl that looked like that.
Set yourself up.
Shane, like when?
No comment?
I have no comment. I just want to remind everybody that frogs were everywhere. Frogs were everywhere. But why frogs? All right, so it might seem like, okay, well, if the water went bad, that's where the frogs come from, right? We already talked about the lifespan, right? How long it takes a frog to get there. These frogs became adults or near adults overnight. Not in 90 days or in 4 years, right? If you were going to have a population explosion like that, it would take 4 years, right? You would have to have a continuing growth in the frogs like that. This happened overnight. But why a frog? Okay, so the Nile was more than just water to the ancient Egyptians, and so were frogs. The goddess of fertility and abundance was Hecate. Okay? And so you had, she looked like this. This is taken right off of a hieroglyph, okay? And so people actually prayed to her for children or for growth of the family. Midwives wore frog amulets to protect births, right? So that the babies being born would be protected to bless the birth. They prayed to Hecate for children. Now, they also believed that Hecate was one of the oldest of the gods and was present and participating in the creation. Okay? Now, this is what they believed. I'm just saying. So, when frogs became a nuisance, right? Who says God doesn't have a sense of humor? Right? The irony here is rich. Okay? God said, okay, you think that a frog is the goddess of abundance? So let me give you an abundance of frogs, okay? And so the fertility of the land brought by the Nile floods was due to Hecate, right? The Nile would flood, and then, and when the Nile flooded, I gotta say, when the Nile flooded, the first thing that people, that's how they knew how to plant, was their frogs would begin to multiply on the banks of the Nile, right? And people would see the frogs coming up and multiplying, and they go, hey, it's time to plant, right? The land has been recharged. So, the irony, right? We talked about that. The irony of the frog god. So, just like with the nation of Israel here in a few months, right? God's going to give them so much that they're sick of it, right? They can't, nobody, I'm going to tell you something, nobody during this time is praying to Hecate for blessing, because they got frogs everywhere. They got frogs. They got frogs in their pockets. They got frogs in their ovens. They got frogs everywhere. You don't like that, brother? Come on. I'm working hard for you here, brother. Okay. All right. So, faux frogs. No, it was more than, what? Don't hide that. Come on, brother. You gotta give it to me.
I said, you need to hop on something else.
Well, be careful that I don't. Be careful I don't fly off the handle. Okay. Faux frogs. Now we see in our story the magicians pull frogs out of their turbans. Okay, they can recreate frogs. Oh, look, I can produce a frog. Well, okay, this is no big deal, right? We've seen a rabbit pull a magician out of a hat.
Yeah.
That'd be a thing, right? We've seen a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat, right? Shows you the hat, there's nothing in it, and all of a sudden, poof, there's a rabbit. How did he do that? Sleight of hand, right? False bottom in the hat. Maybe he had it up his sleeve, right? There's no telling. So these magicians, they could produce frogs. They could say, look, I got a box. It's an empty box. Pharaoh, look at this box. Okay, it's an empty box. Watch this. Poof, abracadabra. Look, there's a frog in it. Okay? But it's nowhere near the scope of the frogs that are inundating them right now. They are everywhere. Now, another thing to note is that as we read the story, the frogs didn't come out of the Nile and sweep across the country in a wave, right? When you read the scripture, what does it sound like? They were just there.
Just there.
Suddenly there were frogs everywhere, right? It wasn't like a tsunami where you looked up and, oh, it's a wave of frogs, right? They were just, and you got up one morning and they were everywhere, right? Because this was a miracle, right? This was God's judgment. But they can't make God's frogs go away. God's frogs are special frogs. That's right. Right? They hopping in. See how I recycled that joke.
You got 3 laughs this time.
Okay. Now, we do not know how long these frogs were in Egypt. Okay? It doesn't say, like for the water, right? It tells us 7 days and Moses went back, right? But here it doesn't say. It doesn't say, well, the frogs were upon the land for 7 days or 14 days. They were on the land for as long as it took to bring Pharaoh to his knees, right? This one waits on Pharaoh. So just how stubborn was he? So, I don't know, 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, right? 28 days. Did he make it a whole month with the frogs underfoot? That's no joke. How long did he go? We don't know. But it was enough that it broke him. Okay? And we see that, right? He calls Moses and begs for Moses to intercede. Please stop this. Please end it. Right? And you can imagine why. You can't get away from the frogs. Okay? I cannot stress to you enough just how incredibly annoying these frogs could be. All right? So you stepped on them. You had them in your food. They were everywhere. All right. So let's jumping, Jeeves. Jumping. Frogs jumping. Get it? No? Nothing. Okay. Okay. Got a little bit from there. So why does Pharaoh surrender for the frogs but not the lack of water? Well, we talked about that a little bit. Water was only a minor inconvenience to Pharaoh. He had somebody go get him water. Go out there and dig a well for Pharaoh. Right? Pharaoh can't be seen digging. But frogs have no respect for people. Right? They don't care if you're a king or a pauper. Right? They don't care. You could be the richest guy in the world, a frog is still gonna hop on your feet. Right? Still gonna hop in your bed. And so Pharaoh was experiencing this discomfort firsthand. Now, again, we got Pharaoh's pretty stubborn. So I figure he went at least as long as the water, 7 days. I figure he went at least that long before he finally broke. But he finally did break, okay? And so he begs for an end, and Moses in effect says, okay, he said, I'll end it. I'll give you the honor of picking the time. When do you want it to stop? When do you want it to stop? Now, this is an interesting moment. He says, you got to stop this, Moses. I can't take it anymore. It's driving me nuts, okay? And so Moses said, okay, pick your time. Now, why wouldn't Moses just turn around and say, okay, the plague is over, Pharaoh has asked. Why did he ask Pharaoh, you pick the time? Right? Why would he ask that question? Why would he let Pharaoh, who is the subject, if you will, of the plague, or the target of the plague, why would he let Pharaoh pick the time?
So Pharaoh wouldn't think that it was a plan or somehow Moses could have cleaned up in time if he was to do it himself.
Exactly. So if Moses were to call for an end to it, Pharaoh could go, well, you just took advantage of something that was going to occur anyway, and you stood up and you ended it, and I didn't pick the time, you picked the time, so you must have known it was going to end about then. Anyway, you just covered your tracks. Okay? Something very similar happens in, I won't say it's in Kings, where Hezekiah gets sick. And the prophet comes in to Hezekiah, he's king of Israel, and he says, put your affairs in order, you're going to die. You're not recovering. Which is, pretty sobering thought, right? And so it says the prophet turned and left. And he delivered the message, bad news, king, you're dying. Put your affairs in order. See ya. And he heads out the door, right? He's going out the palace. But Hezekiah, as the phrasing in the King James goes, turned his face to the wall. All right, so in other words, he privately went to God, right? And he prayed to God. His prayer, I would love to know what he prayed. His prayer was so fervent and so touching that as the prophet was walking out the courtyard of the palace, walking away, God stopped him and said, wait, go back. Hezekiah has touched me with his prayer. Go back and tell him I'm going to give him 15 years. Okay? 15 more years. Now, here's the thing. He goes back up there and he tells Hezekiah, God heard you. You get 15 years. And because you're human, you pick a sign. See, God has given me permission to let you pick what's your sign going to be so that you know what he's going to do. He said, so the shadow on the sundial in the courtyard, do you want it to move ahead 10 points or back 10 points? As a sign that you're going to be healed. You're going to recover. You know what Hezekiah said? It's going to go forward 10 points on its own anyway. That's an easy thing. Make it go backwards 10 points. And that day, the sun went backwards. Or at least the shadow did. On that sundial. Okay? So Hezekiah could know without a shadow of a doubt that he had picked. He was in direct communication with God. Same thing's going on here. Okay? Pharaoh, pick your time. Now, if he was so fed up, I'm like, now, I want now. Make the frogs go away now. But Pharaoh says tomorrow. Now, it's possible that he says tomorrow because everybody understood. Let me back up and let's say it this way. We have become a fast food culture when it comes to praying. Right? You know what that means? It means we pull up, we order at the box, little speaker box. Right? And then we run around to the window, and what do? We pick it up and we go. Right? We treat God that way sometimes. Right? We spend about 30 seconds in prayer, drive around the window, and okay, God, bless me. Right? Back in the day, in this time, it was understood that getting in touch with God, prayer, particularly over big things, took time. Right? And in fact, it says Moses cried out to God, right? You saw that phrasing. Moses cried out to God. That doesn't say it explicitly, but it infers that there was some time spent in communication with God. So Pharaoh says, get a hold of God and tomorrow, right? You do it tomorrow. But by letting Pharaoh pick the time, right, and having the plague in precisely when Pharaoh said, convinces Pharaoh that this is no joke, all right? Otherwise, like I said, Moses could be accused of knowing what some natural end was going to occur. The next thing that we see in this scripture, right, is that the frogs die right where they are.
Yeah, they didn't just hop away.
They didn't hop away, right? They didn't just hop into disappear. They died right where they were. Okay? Only the frogs in the Nile, which to me lends support to the argument that the frogs that infested the houses were miraculous frogs of God. And so when their job was over, they died. But the frogs that would normally have lived in the Nile stayed in the Nile and remained alive to do the job that God in his creation had assigned to them, right? And so he strikes them all dead at the same time. So remember, we came up with this number, right? 16,000 frogs per house, and that doesn't count stables and mangers and public space. I mean, just they're everywhere, and they all croak.
That's better.
You give me that one? You give me that one? Okay. They all.
I won't laugh, but I'll give you that.
Okay. They all croak at the same time. And over they go. Right? So they're all dead. What do we see? What do we see in Scripture? Right? We see that they die and they rot right where they fell. And we see, he says, the Egyptians piled them in great heaps. Again, this goes back to how many frogs were there. They were piled up in great heaps, right? Not little heaps, right? Not little piles. And each family had a little pile of their own. They shoveled these things into huge stinking piles, right? And it says the stench went everywhere. Now, think about this for a minute. So you've just endured some amount of time, we don't know how long, with these frogs hopping all over you, right? Right? They're jumping on you and they're croaking and they're doing all this stuff. And then they suddenly die. What's your first reaction? Yay! What's that smell? It's not me, right? And the stench is everywhere. Now, it was bad when the fish died, but the smell was at the river, right? Now, it's everywhere. It's in your house. How many of y'all ever had a dead rat or mouse in the house? Right? Right? So that rat dies, and maybe you did something. Maybe you put out a little poison. I'm going to get that rat. Right? And you get the rat. Yay, I got the rat. And then about a week later, you're like, oh, what's that smell? That's that rat. And how long does a dead rat smell in your house?
For a while.
For a long time. My mother, bless her heart, she got mice. She put out mice bait, and about a week and a half later, the back bedroom, I mean, you almost couldn't go in it. And we looked everywhere for that.
Everywhere in the wall.
Everywhere. Finally, after a week and a half, I took the floor register out of the floor and took a flashlight and looked down, and in the air conditioning vent was 2 dead mice. Got them out of there and sprayed some Febreze up in there and washed it real good, or tried to, and I could still smell it when I went in the house. It wasn't as bad, but I mean, it was months before I could walk in that back bedroom and not smell that mouse. Okay? The smell was everywhere. And they couldn't. So what would you do today, right, if you had something particularly smelly in your house?
Burn the house down.
Burn the house down. You put it in a bag, you put it in the trash, take it out to the curb, and a truck comes along, and they put it in a truck with other stinky bags, and they carry it off somewhere where they dump it all, but you can't smell it.
But someone else might be able to.
Yeah, somebody else might be able to. But that didn't happen here. Right? There wasn't no place to take it. Because every place you could take it, there was their own stinking piles of frogs. Okay? So they had to endure this smell. And if you thought the frogs were bad, the smell was just as bad. Right? And these frogs, they couldn't get rid of them. They just had to rot down. Right? And maybe some enterprising farmer thought, oh, fertilizer. Yeah, I use fertilizer, right? But I imagine by this point, the Egyptians were so sick of frogs, right? When some poor midwife showed up and said, I'm here to bless the baby, they were like, get that frog out of here, right? Because they were, and that was the point. That's why frogs were used for this plague, right? The inadequacy and the impotence of their gods. Okay? All right. So a man without honor. So we're going to finish our study tonight. Pharaoh calls Moses and he begs him, right? He says, I'll let you go. Get rid of the frogs, I'm going to let you go. And this little snippet of the story gives us some insight into Pharaoh's character. Right? He's a spoiled brat. Right? His word or his promise is simply a tool to be used to manipulate you into what he wants you to do. How many of y'all know somebody like that? They will make promises. Don't be looking at me, brother. You will make promises. Oh, I'll do this, you do that, right? The check is in the mail, right? And I'll tell you, that can break a marriage up quicker than anything else. The manipulation of emotion, right? And that's what Pharaoh's exhibiting here. I will promise you anything until I get into a position of comfort, peace, and strength. And then, forget it, I ain't doing it. I'm not doing what I promised to do because I finally got my way, right? And so we see that. Pharaoh is not a man of honor, okay? Sure, he says, I will, but then as soon as you've done your part, he's comfortable, he reneges. Pharaoh's a king, but he has no honor. And this is one of the reasons that God is dealing so harshly with him. Is he has no honor. Right? And little wonder, he has no God. What is it that brings us honor? Right? Why do people think of you in positive terms? Because of the Christ that's in you, because of the Jesus that's in you, right? And so that's why if we have a good report or a good reputation anywhere, it's because of the moral code that we live by. In other words, what did Jesus say? If you love me, keep my commandments. If we go about trying to keep the commandments of Jesus, right, that gets reflected back from others around us as a good reputation. They say good things. Oh, you can trust her. You can depend on him, right? It's not our nature. It's God's nature in us. All right? So that's frogs. That's all I got for tonight. That's frogs.